Hello, YouTubers. It's time for another exciting episode of Level Headed News' current events here on this beautiful Tuesday. I hope you're all enjoying your day. And I know that you want to be involved in what is going on in the world, so I'm going to bring you some current events, keep you up to speed here. First article that I have for you of DennisMichaelLynch.com. It says, Democratic Attorney General sentenced to prison, handcuffed in court before her family. Attorney General Kathleen Kane was originally charged for illegally disclosing details from a grand jury investigation to embarrass a rival and under oath. Prosecutors called her crimes egregious and pushed for jail time. They said a paranoid Kane in the 800-person office and the wider law enforcement community through a scheme to embarrass rival prosecutors who had left the office. Of Judge Wendy Demichik Alloy, Kathleen Kane was sentenced to 10 to 23 months in jail for illegally disclosing details from a grand jury investigation, 2 felony counts of perjury, and 7 misdemeanor charges. A political neophyte, Demchuk Alloy told Kane that her off with your heads mentality and failure to transition from campaigner to public servant. Oh, this case is about ego, the ego of a politician consumed with her image from day one, Demchuk Alloy said. This case is about retaliation and revenge against perceived enemies who this defendant felt had embarrassed her in the press, or the ultimate collateral damage. They are casualties of your actions, but you did that, not this court. Kane was the first woman and first Democrat elected as Pennsylvania's top prosecutor. The former assistant county prosecutor was seen as a rising star in the state Democratic Party before her office fell into turmoil over her behavior and illegal actions. She had been a stay-at-home mother, a former assistant county prosecutor, before using her husband's trucking fortune to run office in 2012. On Monday, former deputy said in court that a dark cloud permeated every corner of the Attorney General's office, and victims, witnesses, and other law enforcement agencies feared working with them. Of systematic firings and Nixonian espionage, a terror zone in the office, said Eric Olson, a career prosecutor who is now the chief deputy attorney general. Enjoyed most good press early on as she supported gay marriage, ramped up a child predator unit run by her twin sister, and questioned her predecessor's handling of Penn State sex assault case. But turmoil inside the office became apparent as top deputies and career prosecutors headed for the doors. One of them, Frank Fina, run the Penn State probe and other sensitive investigations led to the leak. Kane, taking aim at him, had a consultant pass confidential files to a reporter about a corruption case. Fina had declined to charge the office. She then tried to frame someone else for the leak. Aides testified at a obstruction trial. Kane and her husband are now estranged, and she shares custody of the teenage boys. I really don't care what happens to me, Kane said before leaning toward the defense table to grab tissues. There's no more torture in the world than to watch your children suffer and to do with it. After the decision was made, Kane was handcuffed on the spot before family and friends. She has posted her $75,000 cash bail and now remains free while she appeals her conviction. This in this article, if you want to take a look at that. We have here is off of WND.com, and it says UN goes all in for unlimited migration. Says the United Nations has cooked up a new urban agenda coming soon to a city near you. It was unveiled this week in Quito, Ecuador, Habitat 3 conference. And part of the plan, enthusiastically embraced by Hillary Clinton, calls for unlimited migration across open borders. Migrants displaced by war, failing economics, and other hardships will be seen as having rights in nations other than their own. Cities are seen as the key battlegrounds, and the UN conference in Quito has had a lot to say. Our city will be expected to embrace migrants of all types from all regions of the world. By now, most Americans who follow world events are familiar with the UN's plan for global governance as envisioned by its 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, approved by 90 world leaders, including President Obama and Pope Francis in September of 2015. The agenda includes 17 goals aimed at ending hunger, wiping out poverty, and stamping out global income inequality by transforming our world through sweeping changes ostensibly aimed at freeing cross-border labor mobility, among other things. Anointed by Obama as his successor, said in a speech to Wall Street bankers she envisions the U.S. as part of a single hemispheric common market with free trade and open borders, according to WikiLeaks data dumps. And another bombshell revealed by WikiLeaks, Mrs. Clinton told Goldman Sachs bankers that Americans who want to limit immigration are fundamentally un-American. She has also called for a 550% increase in the resettlement of Syrian refugees in America. That's 550% more than Obama vastly increased levels, more than 12,000 resettled in 1 year. In short, In short, Hillary's agenda for cities sounds an awful lot like the UN's agenda for cities as laid out in the new urban agenda document this week by world leaders in Quito. She totally in line with the UN agenda, on board with everything they do, says economist Patrick Wood, author of Rising, the Trojan Horse of Global Transformation. Announced her $135 billion Breaking Every Barrier program for America's cities. In this plan, she makes 37 pledges promising everything from removal of blight of affordable housing in areas that are currently out of the price range of refugees, immigrants, the chronically unemployed, and the underemployed. She intends to build on the successes of her husband and Obama administration in using public-private partnerships to transform cities. Obama's contribution in this area included his affirmative furthering fair housing rule, which forces grant-receiving cities to infuse their low-crime suburban areas deemed too white housing marketed to low-income renters. This fits right in with the UN's 2030 agenda. She's making a pre-announcement here that she's going to follow the UN agenda, Wood said to her fellow globalists that she's 100% on board with their agenda. The problem that keeps globalists like Obama and Clinton up at nights is how to implement the sweeping changes laid out in the UN 2030 agenda last September at the Globally Sustainable in New York. That's where Habitat 3 comes into play. It's called UN Conference on Housing and Sustainable Development, or Habitat 3 for short. It is on world cities. It's the largest UN conference ever. Habitat 3 was attended by a staggering 50,000 people, including more than 200 mayors and another 140 city delegations. And there's some video in this if you want to go. It says the sole purpose of this conference is to approve. Try that again. On me here. Okay, the sole purpose of this conference is to approve a 24-page document called the New Urban Agenda. Only purpose of this conference is to rubber stamp the document and elevate it and lift it up to the world, said Wood. And this is trying to play something, and we got to get that stopped. There we go. It says, and it looks, all right, and right now it looks like they are, everybody, all the nations. In this document lies globalist plans for cities, all cities, big and small. Every American who wants to live in a city will at some point see the fruits of the plan of the UN has world, says Woods, global governance, and the technocrat um, movement. Conference convenes only once every 20 years, but when it does, it leaves a trail of anti-capitalist, anti-liberty global standards in its wake, says Woods. These are the standards by which the UN wants in the world to be operated. They come packaged as non-binding, and Congress never approves them. Yet somehow the global standards coming out of major UN conferences always seem to filter down to everyone, even the smallest American hamlet. How? Through federal grants. Federal grants will at some point be required to implement the practices that the UN has declared sustainable. Inclusive by design, coercive by default. The buzzword in the new urban agenda is inclusive, or this concept has long history with global elites and technocrats. The definition of technocracy, as used by the original technocrats back in 1938, was the science of social engineered and scientific operations of the entire social mechanism to produce and distribute goods and services. That's according to the Technocrat magazine. They use the word entire twice in the definition, so I'm really not surprised we see it showing up in these conferences today, Wood said. Their intent is to create a net that will catch 100% of the people. The word inclusive or inclusively appeared in the urban no fewer than 36 times. There is no exclusion, Wood says. If you read the document, you'll, under the item 6A, transformative commitments, or the statement starts out, leave no one behind. That same phrase, leave no one behind, is in the UN's 2030 agenda. In fact, just about everywhere you go, UN, you'll find this concept, Wood said. It's a little disturbing. Wood says the UN is resurrecting an old concept that fizzled in the early days of the technocrat movement. Its time hadn't arrived yet back in the 1930s, but now things are different. Data in the world to embrace a set of globalized one world standards for everything, whether it be common core education standards, globalized police standards that Attorney General Loretta Lynch announced in the UN last fall in the form of Strong Cities Network, or global standards for healthcare, a la Obamacare, you name it, the United Nations wants to standardize it. Hurdle in the race to standardize the world is the issue of immigration. Page 7 of the new urban agenda talks about cities providing opportunities for dialogue, paying particular attention to contributions of women and children, the elderly and disabled, refugees and internally displaced persons, and migrants, regardless of migration status, based on race, religion, or socioeconomic status. Everyone is welcome. Wood notes that in America, exactly what John Podesta, Clinton's campaign manager, has already said, that anyone with a driver's license should be allowed to vote. Read it, he said, it doesn't matter if they're legal or illegal, wanted or unwanted, jihadist or non-jihadist, sick or healthy. If they show up in your community, they must participate in the affairs of that country immediately, whatever country they find themselves in. The preamble to the new urban agenda says cities are the key to tackling global challenges. So these people are viewing cities as the key ingredient right now to implementing sustainable development, and they say this battle for sustainability lost in the cities. And the UN document goes on to state that this agenda is the first step for addressing sustainable development in an integrated and coordinated way, national, subnational, and local levels. In essence, it's a roadmap to global governance where American cities will no longer get their direction from elected officials representing them on council or even the state legislature, but the United Nations itself. The local councils will likely not even know that the rules they are following in order to qualify for federal grants are tied to United Nations standards for sustainability. Committing to a paradigm shift. The document talks about cities committing to a paradigm shift in the way they plan, develop, and manage urban development. Wood said they're saying it's going to be but all the gains that sustainable development have made since 1992, there's been a complaint that it hasn't gone fast enough or far enough, and that it's not inclusive enough, that some pockets have been left out. So what they're saying here is that the new urban agenda document is really, in their minds, the first step to nationalizing it. First step to making sustainable development completely operational. That's huge. Journalist and former aide in the Nixon White House who went on to become Christian pastor and who has on globalism said the UN is making a full assault against American system of government which requires federalism, states' rights, and separation of powers. The UN is a glaring example of a course of bureaucracies like Alabama, and a tiny seed will inevitably spread until it controls the whole. Henley, author of God and Churchill, told WND in an email. And he, like Wood, sees Hillary Clinton in the thick of the battle, side of the globalists and not America first. The leftist progressive is the fertilizer. Agencies sprout and grow and bring forth policy confabs. The conference then produce white paper that ultimately become the source of politics. It's a leftist progressivist dream. Sustainability is a code word for regulatory authority, Henley said, and that the suffocating vine that chokes out everything else. Perfectly with the new globalism and its dream of a world without borders. Anything can be done in the name of sustainable future, including humanitarian invasion of a sovereign state, but only if its leaders embrace the same left progressive philosophy at the bureaucracy's headquarters in New York. This makes a Hillary Clinton presidency even more foreboding, he said. And these progressives include many in the Republican Party who are now shilling for Clintons, such as House Speaker Paul Ryan and Arizona Senator John McCain. An article by Breitbart's Julia Hahn has been working hand in hand with the Clinton campaign for months. Seek preservation of liberty, nurturing principles, sustenance of values that reset the control of the bureaucrats and guarantee freedom from a globalist in the form of the UN, Henley said. Eric Voegelin's 1975 book, From Enlightenment to Revolution, describes with amazing the line of progress according to the revolutionaries who drive what Henley calls the new globalism, from the local to the global, from the individual to the mass humanity, to a concentrated global power. This is the big picture of which Habitat 3 and its new urban agenda. Next article, C.com, it says Canada's 2 Trump towers facing troubles. And this reads, in Vancouver, the developer of new Trump Tower has been under pressure for months to drop the Republican presidential candidate's name from the project. Meanwhile, the Trump Tower in Toronto is the subject of a lawsuit after facing years of controversy. Donald Trump's controversial run for U.S. president is having an impact on his business in Canada, and knock-on effects have partnered with his brand. The opening date for the Vancouver hotel has been delayed until 2017, well after November's U.S. election. A contest offering a chance to meet with the Trump family for the grand opening caused a stir. According to across the country, the Toronto building, which opened in 2012, has been the target of a lawsuit by small investors who claim they were misled into buying into the project. Its developer, Talon Development Incorporated, has tried to remove the Trump name from the troubled hotel and condominium complex. The story is similar in other countries. In Dubai, a firm building a golf complex with Mr. Trump removed his name and image from the property. In Turkey, the developers of Trump Towers Istanbul have tried to distance themselves from the Republican hopeful, and there have been protests outside Trump buildings in the U.S. Demonstrators and decadents at Trump's new Washington hotel. Angus Reid Institute poll released in December indicated that 56% of Canadians supported having the Trump brand dumped from the two Canadian towers. Brent Totteron, a Vancouver-based city planner, was the first to openly oppose Trump's branding on the 63-story Canadian tower designed by famed architect Arthur Erickson to have a distinctive 45-degree twist as it rose into the sky. We've taken a building that is the second tallest in the skyline, at least in part by one of our most revered Canadian architects, a very elegant piece of architecture for our skyline, and retroactively duct taped Trump's name to it, he said in an interview. The luxury hotel and condominium tower in downtown Vancouver is owned by the Holborn Group, a private real estate developer which partnered with the Trump brand in 2013. Mr. Trump attended the announcement accompanied by his children, Eric, Ivanka, and Donald Jr. I believe it's going to be a fantastic success. I love Vancouver, said Mr. Trump at the time. The project is licensed to use the Trump name and brand, including for Canada's first law by Ivanka Trump, by the real estate magnate's company, which is also overseeing the building's interior design. In December, Mr. Totteron renewed his call for the Holborn Group to distance themselves from the Trump name. He was joined by Vancouver Mayor Gregor Robertson, who said the brand had no place in the line. Donald Trump's hateful positions and commentary remind us all of much darker times in our world's past. Incumbent upon all of us to forcefully challenge hatred in all of the ways that confronts us, he wrote in a letter to the developer. The Holborn Group did not respond to requests for comment, but in previous statements has noted that the still unfinished building will create some 300 new jobs. That has contributed immensely to the growth of Vancouver is not in any way involved in U.S. politics. As such, we would not comment further on Mr. Trump's personal or political agenda, nor any political issues, CEO Ju Kim Tai said in December. Nearly 10,000 people have applied to work at the Vancouver Trump Tower, according to the hotel's general manager, and Holborn says it has sold all the luxury condos in the building. In Toronto, project developer Talon was close to a deal to sell the troubled 65-story hotel and condominium complex at the heart of the city's financial district earlier this year. However, Toronto's Trump Tower is currently off the market. Talon chairman Alex Schneider was also trying to have the Trump name removed from the building, at one point seeking to do so through arbitration. Those efforts also appear to have stalled. A lawyer for Talon refused to comment other than to note there is currently no lawsuit between the owners of the Trump of the hotel and Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump first announced his involvement in an early version of the project in 2001, and it was brought under the umbrella in 2004. Businessman attended the official groundbreaking in 2007. The Trump Organization does not have an ownership stake in the building, but It operates and manages the hotel and licensed the Trump name to the complex for a fee. The building is the subject of a lawsuit by disgruntled buyers who lost money after investing in the property. In one instance, almost 1 million Canadian dollars, $750,000, or 613,000 pounds. In a recent decision, an Orlando court ruled in favor of two investors, saying one could be discharged from his obligations and another could be awarded damages. Talon is considering appealing against the decision. Next article I have for you is off of BBC.com. It says child refugees in Turkey making clothes for UK shops. Children have been making clothes for British shoppers, an undercover BBC investigation has found. Panorama investigated factories in Turkey and found children had been working on clothes for Marks and Spencer and the online retailer ASOS. Adult refugees were also found working illegally on Zara and Mango jeans. All brands say they carefully monitor the supply chains and do not tolerate exploitation of refugees or children. It says the kids who have to sew to survive. Marks and Spencer says its inspection have not found a single Syrian refugee working in its supply chain in Turkey. Found 7 Syrians working in one of the British retailer's main factories. The refugees often earned little more than £1 an hour, well below the Turkish minimum wage. They were employed through a middleman who paid them in cash on the street. Unacceptable. Told Panorama they were poorly treated at the factory. He said if anything happens to a Syrian, they'll throw him away like a piece of cloth. The youngest worker the youngest worker was 15 years old, and he was working more than 12 hours a day ironing clothes before they were shipped to the UK. Person for Marks and Spencer said the program's findings were extremely serious and unacceptable to M&S. It is offering permanent legal employment to any Syrians who were employed in the factory. Is fundamental to M&S. All of our suppliers are contractually required to comply with our global sourcing principles, which cover what we expect and require of them and their treatment of workers. We do not tolerate such breaches of these principles, and we will do all we can do to ensure that this does not happen again. But critics say retailers are not doing enough to stop the problems highlighted by Panorama. Danielle McMillan from the Business and Human Rights Resources Center says the brands need to understand that they are responsible. It's not enough to say we didn't know about it. It's not our fault. They have responsibility to monitor and to understand where their clothes are being made and what conditions they're being made in. Pitiful wages. Many clothes are now made in Turkey because it is close to Europe and used to dealing with last-minute orders. This allows retailers to get new designs into shops more quickly than if they were made elsewhere. But Turkey is a challenging place to do business. Concerns are rising about the exploitation of workers after the arrival of almost 3 million Syrian refugees. These do not have work permits, and many of them are working illegally in the garment industry. Panorama reporter Dara McIntyre spoke to dozens of Syrian workers who felt they were being exploited. He said, they speak of pitiful wages and terrible working conditions. They know they are being exploited, but they really don't, but they know they can't do anything about it. In one backstreet workshop in Istanbul, the program team found several Syrian children hard at work. They also discovered, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, ASOS sample in the office. ASOS accepts its clothes were made in the factory, but says it's not an approved factory. The company has since inspected and found 11 Syrian adults and 3 Syrian children under 16 at work. Hazardous chemicals. ASOS says the children will be financially supported so they can return to school, and the adult refugees will be paid a wage until they have been found legal work. Spokesperson for the company said, "We have implemented these remediation programs despite the fact that this factory has nothing to do with AOS." Investigation also found Syrian refugees working 12 hours a day in a factory that was distressing jeans for Mango and Zara. The refugees were involved in spraying hazardous chemicals to bleach the jeans, but most of the workers did not even have basic face masks. Mango says the factory was working as subcontractor without its knowledge. Its subsequent inspection did not find any Syrian workers and found good conditions except for some personal safety measures. Our company, Inditex, I guess it is, says its factory inspections are highly effective way of monitoring and improving conditions. Already found significant non-compliance in an adult in June and had given the factory until December to make the necessary improvements. I guess that's the audit. Okay, try that again. It had already found significant non-compliance in an audit in June and had given the factory until December to make necessary improvements. That's better. It goes on and says, in another Istanbul factory, Panorama found Syrian adults at work alongside Turkish children as young as 10. The owner said he had been working for Next and showed the undercover team a set of Next pajamas that he said the factory had helped produce. Next says the pajamas were actually made by another supplier, and the pajamas we saw may have been a sample. It says samples circulate widely, and that the presence of a sample in a factory does not mean it was made there. Panorama Undercover Refugees Who Make Our Clothes is on BBC, one of the 20 minutes and 30 seconds BST on Monday, the 24th of October, and available on BBC Player at BBC iPlayer afterwards. Okay, so there's that article. Look at that. The next one says NewYorkDailyNews.com. And I'm waiting for it to catch up to me here and spit it out on my screen. There we go. Soldiers at Fort Campbell Army Base allegedly sold military equipment to foreign nations on eBay. Now, how in the hell does this happen? Oh my goodness. I'll get it scrolled up here and take a look at this article. Soldiers at Fort Campbell sold more than $1 million worth of military gear and weapons parts to buyers worldwide through eBay, according to a federal indictment unsealed on Thursday. Soldiers allegedly hawked parts of a grenade launcher and machine guns that were stolen from warehouses near the Army base in Clarksville, Tennessee. And inherently dangerous in the wrong hands and outside of the military or police tactical use, U.S. Attorney for Middle District of Tennessee David Rivera said at a press conference. The 6 Fort Campbell soldiers, Michael Barlow, Jonathan Wolford, Kyle Head, Alexander Hollabaugh, Dustin Nelson, and Aaron Warner for stealing and selling equipment in 2013. That is never offered for sale by the U.S. Department of Defense as surplus. The equipment was classified by the Defense Department as Demel D, is not allowed to be sold, and it's meant to be destroyed by the military. The soldiers sold a sight for an M203 grenade launcher, as well as parts of an M240 or M249 machine guns. They also offered body armor, night vision goggles, and sensitive communications equipment. The surplus was sold to buyers in the United States as well as Russia, China, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, Lithuania, Moldova, Malaysia, Romania, and Mexico. None of the soldiers vetted buyers or asked how the weapons parts would be used, according to court papers. Two Clarksville civilians, John Roberts and Corey Wilson, also faced charges for conspiracy, wire fraud, arms export control. According to the indictment, Roberts in 2013 texted with a person listed in his phone as a sergeant to arrange the sales. I just got that stuff was crazy risky, the sergeant, who was not named in court papers, wrote. Imagine, Roberts replied. I wondered about that. I imagine it's pretty locked up. The indictment does not detail how soldiers allegedly swiped the gear from storage or when the Army base realized it was missing. Authorities are now trying to seize back as many weapons as possible. Each defendant faces at least 5 years in prison. Officials at Fort Campbell did not immediately return requests for comment. eBay's policies prohibit the sale of military-issued weapons, ammunition, body armor, and other military-issued equipment. eBay worked collaboratively with law enforcement agencies, providing them with the information necessary to support their case. eBay executives said in a statement, eBay has clear policies on what can and can't be listed across various categories, and we have dedicated teams that proactively and reactively remove listings that are not permitted to be sold on our marketplace. The indictment says some of the sales were caught and canceled by eBay, but the men then just reposted the items under different descriptions, Robert allegedly wrote in a text to Wilson below. Many of these items were listed online as new, real, never worn, or a military issue. Wow. They're in trouble. Next one we have is off of CNN.com. It says plane crash in Malta kills 5 in surveillance operation. A light aircraft on a French customs surveillance operation crashed in Malta shortly after takeoff on Monday, killing all 5 people on board. Passengers on a nearby flight waiting to depart watched in horror as flames shot out and dark plume of smoke billowed from the wreckage. Witness Ben Kundal told CNN. Everyone was screaming, he said. The flames were the length of the aircraft, so it was clear to everyone what had just happened straight away. The Fairchild Metroliner, Fairchild Metroliner, which was taking part in an operation to track illicit human and drug trafficking routes, crashed at 7:20 a.m., which would be 1:20 a.m. Eastern Time on Monday, officials said. No explosion before the crash. Official information, footage, and eyewitnesses included 3 members of the armed forces of Malta at the nearby Sapi barracks, and 2 commercial airline pilots clearly indicate there was no explosion prior to impact. The Maltese government said in a statement, several inquiries as established by international rules and the laws of Malta are currently underway to establish all the facts. All 5 people aboard the plane were French nationals, the statement said. Witness Lauren Asaparty, who filmed the crash on his car's dash cam as he was driving to work, told CNN he heard a blast as the plane slammed into the ground. I saw the plane go vertical. It was coming at a very fast speed, Apazzarati said. It kind of turned and planted into the ground. The flight was part of a French customs operation that had been going on for the past 5 months, Maltese officials said in a statement. It had been scheduled as a local flight and was due to return within hours without landing in third countries, the statement said. The plane was registered in the United States to a company called Worldwide Aircraft Services. The Maltese government said it had been leased to a Luxembourg company. Earlier reports indicated that the EU border officials were on board the plane, but EU Foreign Affairs Chief Frederica Mogherini said on Twitter that no EU officials were involved in the crash. The next article that I have for you is off of westernjournalism.com. And it says, federal judge upholds injunction against Obama's transgender school policy. Stopped President Obama's policy forcing public schools to allow students claiming to be transgender into bathrooms that do not correspond with the gender on their birth certificates. The U.S. District Court Judge Reed O'Connor rejects the Obama administration's request to lift an injunction against the Department of Education's transgender bathroom policy. The injunction was originally issued in August in response to a challenge to the policy by 13 state attorney generals. The Justice Department requested an injunction be limited to 13 states who objected, but this week O'Connor issued his ruling against that. It's clear from Supreme Court and Fifth Circuit precedent that the court has the power to issue a nationwide injunction where appropriate. Both Title IX and Title VII rely on a consistent, uniform application of national standards in education and workplace policy, O'Connor said in his ruling. A geographically limited injunction would be ineffective. O'Connor's ruling also suggests the idea of making students use the bathroom corresponding with their biological gender doesn't fall under the definition of discrimination, saying the government should continue to address issues of discrimination on the basis of race, national origin, or disability, but it cannot consider the definition of sex as it relates to gender identity for the use of bathrooms or changing facilities. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who represented one of the 13 states objecting to the Department of Education's transgender policy, was happy with O'Connor's decision. The court's reformation of a nationwide injunction should send a clear message to the president that Texas won't sit idly by as he continues to ignore the Constitution, Paxton wrote in a statement. The president cannot rewrite the laws enacted by the elected representatives of the people and then threaten to take away funding from schools to force them to fall into line. The issue of transgender use of opposite-sex restrooms has been a hot topic and the subject of much disagreement from the court system. The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals in Virginia ruled the Obama transgender school mandate was constitutional and issued an injunction allowing Caitlin Grimm, a transgender girl who changed her name to Gavin, to use the boys' facilities. The U.S. Supreme Court temporarily stayed that injunction. The Justice Department says it will appeal O'Connor's decision to the Fifth Circuit Court in New Orleans. What do you think? Scroll down to make your comments below in this article. So there's that one. The next one I have for you is off of MSN.com. It says prescription drug prices headed for double-digit increases in 2017. So if you take prescription drugs, pockets. This article says spending on prescription drugs continues to be one of the biggest drivers pushing healthcare costs upwards. Specialty drugs get a lot of attention when it comes to higher costs, although price increases occurring across the board. Specialty drug prices are projected to increase 18.7% next year after growing by 18.9% in 2016. Although they make up less than 1% of prescriptions, specialty drugs account for 35% of the prescription drug price trend, according to HR consultancy Siegel. Meanwhile, the overall cost of all drugs prescribed for employees under the age 65 is expected to grow 11.6% next year, on top of an 11.3% hike this year. That's a big jump that affects most Americans. Nearly half of Americans have taken at least one prescription drug in the last month, and 1 in 5 uses 3 or more, according to the Centers for Disease Control. Just 10 drugs comprised more than 20% of the 4.4 billion drug prescriptions given to Americans last year, according to an April report from IMS Health. The report found that Americans have an average out-of-pocket cost of $44 per brand name prescription drug, up 22% from the previous year. That adds up to an annual bill of more than $500 for a consumer filling just one brand name prescription drug each month. For families where multiple people are taking multiple prescriptions, that can quickly add up to thousands of dollars. All I have for you is off of PCWorld.com. Chinese firm admits its hacked DVRs cameras were behind Friday's massive DDoS attack. Chinese electronics component manufacturer says its products inadvertently played a role in massive cyber attacks that disrupted major internet sites in the U.S. on Friday. Hangzhou Xiaomi Technology, a vendor behind DVRs and internet-connected cameras, said on Sunday that security vulnerabilities involved weak default passwords in its products were partially to blame. According to security researchers, malware known as Myra or Myrai, I'm not sure how that's pronounced, but it's MIRAI, has been taking advantage of these vulnerabilities by infecting the devices and using them to launch huge distributed denial of service attacks, including Friday's outage. Mirai is a huge disaster for the Internet of, the Internet of Things. He said in an email to IDG News Service. We have to admit that our products also suffered from hackers' break-ins and illegal use. Mirai works by enslaving IoT devices to form a massive connected network. The devices are then used to deluge websites with requests, overloading the site and effectively taking them offline. Because these devices have weak default passwords and are easy to infect, Mirai has found spreading has been found spreading to at least 500,000 devices, according to internet backbone provider Level 3 Communications. He says it patched the flaws with its products in December of 2015, and its devices now ask the customer to change the default password when used for the first time. But products running older versions of the firmware are still vulnerable. To stop malware, he suggests advising that customers update their products' firmware and change the default username and passwords to them. Consumers can also disconnect the products from the internet. Botnets created from the Mirai malware were at least partially responsible for Friday's massive internet disruption, according to DIN, the DNS service provider targeted in the assault. We observed tens of millions of discrete IP addresses associated with Myra botnet of the attack, DIN said in a statement. The DDoS attack, which flooded sites with an overwhelming amount of internet traffic, slowed and stopped access to Twitter, Spotify, PayPal, and many more services. Although DIN managed to fend off the disruption and restore access to its service, Mirai-powered botnets could easily strike again. Earlier this month, the unknown developer of Mirai malware released its source code to the hacker community. Security firms have already noticed copycat hackers using it. The Mirai malware also appeared to target products from other IoT vendors that use weak default passwords in their devices. Security experts have noticed the malware tries a list of more than 60 combinations of usernames and passwords. Last month, a Mirai-powered botnet also briefly took down the website of a cybersecurity reporter, Brian Krebs, by delivering 665 Gbps of traffic, making it one of the largest recorded DDoS attacks in history. And another one here is from politicalears.com. It says Germany folds to share law, approves child marriages. Germany has basically fallen to the caliphate with the blessing of globalist Angela Merkel. The statistics in Germany spewed by the government on number of child marriages is believed to be total falsehood and much, much, much higher than reported. In Islam, marrying children as young as 8 years old is dirt common. In May, an appeals court in Bamberg recognized the marriage of a 15-year-old Syrian girl to a 21-year-old cousin. The ruling effectively legalized Sierra marriages, or Sierra, oh gosh, Sierra child marriages in Germany, and it held Merkel's blessing. It sets precedent not only for child marriages, but also Sharia law. Religious or cultural justifications obscure the simple fact that older, perverse men are abusing young girls. Rainier Wendt, head of German police union, and he is correct. This is pedophilia, and it's bound to spread in Germany with the influx of Islamic refugees, along with crime and religious intolerance. German authorities are debating the contours of a new law that would crack down on child marriages after it emerged that some 1,500 underage brides are now living in the country. The married minors are among the more than 1 million migrants from Africa, Asia, and the Middle East who entered Germany in 2015. The German Interior Ministry, responding to a Freedom of Information Act request, recently revealed that 1,475 married children are known to be living in Germany as of July 31st, 2016, including 361 children who are under the age of 14. Most of the married children are from Syria, 664, Afghanistan, 157, and Iraq, 100. Nearly 80%, 1,152, are girls. The true number of child marriages in Germany is believed to be much higher than the official statistics suggested because many are being concealed. German law currently allows minors aged 16 or over to get married if their partner is of legal age and the partner's or guardian's consent. Germany does not recognize marriages contracted abroad if the partner is under 14, but German family courts have discretion to determine the validity of marriages concluded abroad by minors who are 14 or older. There's no age limit for marriage in Islam. What is occurring here is transforming German culture and mores. It is terraforming the country into an Islamic one. Polygamy should be next on the docket at this rate. The ruling that allowed the marriage of a 15-year-old girl has, or try this again, the ruling that allowed the marriage of the 15-year-old has been described as crash course in Syrian Islamic marriage law. It ignited a firestorm of criticism. Some accused the court in Bamberg of applying Sharia law over German law to legalize a practice that is banned in Germany, and that is exactly what happened. Don't think it can't happen here in the U.S., by the way. With the way Obama and Clinton are turning the country, it's only a matter of time. Many are calling for the abolishment of child marriage in Germany, but I have severe doubts about Merkel listening. It's part of her one world agenda. So there was the news for you. I always like to end the show with a little positive affirmation or a video or something. And for some reason, I could not get the video that I wanted to play. So we're not going to have a video to end the show, but this is a positive affirmation for you. Every day I do something for myself. Every once in a while, I need to make time for me. And you need to write that down and keep it, just tape it to your bathroom mirror, or your refrigerator, or someplace that you're going to see it often. Because it's very important. Do something for yourself once in a while. It's very important to make time for yourself. I'll say this again for you. Every day I do something for myself. Every once in a while, I need to make time for me. Take some time to meditate. Take some time to reflect. Take some time to prepare and think forward for your future. Take time to breathe. I hope it's beautiful where you are today. I hope you kick your shoes off, put your toes down in the grass, curl them up good, soak up earth energy, feel that energy coming into you. Balance yourself. Take a deep breath of fresh air and be glad you woke up above ground. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.